Marcus Williams, a 52-year-old janitor at Sterling Financial Group, has spent 8 years being invisible to the executives and employees who walk past him daily. Despite his dedication and quiet observations of the corporate world around him, he's treated as part of the furniture. But when CEO Jonathan Sterling's 7-year-old daughter Emma faces a life-threatening emergency during a company event, Marcus becomes the unlikely hero. His quick thinking and selfless actions not only save her life, but also force everyone to see the man they've ignored for years. This is the story of how one moment of courage transforms both Marcus's life and the company's understanding of true worth and human dignity. Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway of Sterling Financial Group's 42nd floor, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished surface. He had walked these same corridors every weekday for 8 years, 3 months, and 17 days, not that anyone had ever bothered to count except him. The morning sun streamed through the floor, 2 ceiling windows, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow him whole as he moved between them. He glanced at his reflection in the glass doors of Conference Room A. 52 years old, graying temples, shoulders slightly hunched from years of mopping floors and emptying trash bins. His navy blue uniform was clean but worn, the Sterling Financial logo on his chest pocket faded from countless washes. Marcus straightened his shoulders and continued his routine. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson," he said quietly as the vice president of operations strode past, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the floor. Peterson didn't even glance in his direction, too busy scrolling through his phone to acknowledge the man who had been cleaning his office every day for nearly a decade. Marcus wasn't surprised. He had long since stopped expecting responses to his greetings. In this world of power suits and corner offices, he was part of the infrastructure, as essential as the air conditioning and as noticed as the fire sprinklers. He wheeled his cart toward the executive suite, passing clusters of employees discussing quarterly reports and merger proposals. Their voices created a constant hum of ambition and stress, a symphony Marcus had learned to tune out while still catching fragments that painted pictures of their lives. Sarah from accounting was worried about her son's college tuition. David from marketing had just bought his 3rd BMW. Jennifer from HR was planning her destination wedding in Tuscany. Marcus knew all their stories because invisible people hear everything. They talked around him, through him, sometimes right over him, as if he were a ghost. He had overheard affairs, business deals, family dramas, and corporate secrets that could topple careers, but he kept them all locked away in the vault of his discretion. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Patricia Hawthorne, the chief marketing officer, tapping her manicured nails against her designer handbag. She was a striking woman in her early 40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a permanent expression that suggested she had just smelled something unpleasant. "You missed a spot yesterday," she said, pointing at a barely visible mark on the glass door behind him. "Right there. I had clients in that conference room, and it was embarrassing." Marcus nodded, pulling out his spray bottle and cloth. "I'm sorry, Miss Hawthorne. I'll take care of it right away," she huffed impatiently, checking her Rolex. "Just be more thorough, please. We have standards here." As she click-clacked away, Marcus carefully cleaned the spot, which he noticed was actually a fingerprint that had appeared after his shift yesterday. But he said nothing. He never said anything. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm. Marcus emptied wastepaper baskets filled with crumpled reports and half-eaten organic salads. He vacuumed around expensive furniture while executives held conference calls about market projections. He cleaned windows while watching the city sprawl below, thinking about the millions of people down there who, like him, were working hard just to stay afloat. Around 10:30, Marcus was polishing the brass nameplates outside the executive offices when he overheard a conversation that made him pause. "The annual company picnic is this Saturday," said Rebecca Martinez, Jonathan Sterling's personal assistant. She was talking to Tom Bradley, the head of security, one of the few people in the building who occasionally nodded at Marcus. "Everything confirmed?" Tom asked. "Caterers, entertainment, security detail for Mr. Sterling's family. His wife Emma and little Emma will be there. The daughter specifically requested the bounce house." Marcus smiled slightly. He had seen 7-year-old Emma Sterling twice before when she visited her father's office. Unlike the adults, she had looked right at him both times, once even waving shyly from behind her mother's designer dress. Children hadn't yet learned that people like Marcus were supposed to be invisible. "Just make sure the safety protocols are followed," Tom continued. "You know how Mr. Sterling gets about his family's security." Marcus resumed polishing the nameplate. Jonathan Sterling, Chief Executive Officer. He had cleaned this same brass plate thousands of times, but he had exchanged maybe 20 words with the man whose name it bore. Sterling was always rushing somewhere important, always on a call about something urgent, always surrounded by an entourage of subordinates competing for his attention. The executive suite door opened, and speak of the devil, Jonathan Sterling emerged, already talking rapidly into his phone. He was a tall man in his late 30s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in 2 months. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his expensive cologne lingered in the air long after he passed. No, that's not what I said," Sterling was saying into his phone. "The Jakarta proposal needs to be restructured before the board meeting. Get Richardson on the line and tell him ... He walked right past Marcus, so close that Marcus could have reached out and touched his sleeve. But Sterling's eyes never shifted from the middle distance, never acknowledged the man maintaining the shine on his nameplate, never registered the human being who ensured his working environment remained immaculate. Marcus watched Sterling disappear into the elevator, surrounded by his usual cluster of advisors and assistants. Then he returned to his polishing, wondering what it would be like to command that kind of attention, to have people hang on your every word, to matter that much in the grand scheme of things. By lunchtime, Marcus had finished the executive floor and moved down to the main lobby. The Sterling Financial Group building was a monument to success, all marble and glass and gleaming metal, designed to intimidate clients and impress competitors. Marcus had seen hundreds of deals brokered in these halls, witnessed the ebb and flow of corporate fortunes, observed the human drama that played out behind the facade of professional competence. As he mopped near the reception desk, he caught fragments of conversation about the upcoming company picnic. Families were invited, children would be playing, and there would be speeches about corporate values and team building. Marcus wondered if he would even be noticed among the crowd of employees and their families. "Hey Marcus," he looked up, surprised to hear his name. Tom Bradley was approaching, his security badge gleaming against his dark suit. Marcus replied, grateful for the acknowledgement. "How's your day going?" "Can't complain." "Listen, you're working the company picnic on Saturday, right?" "Yes sir, clean up JT." Tom nodded. "Good. We might need extra eyes out there. Lot of families, lot of kids running around. You know how it is." Marcus did know. Company events always generated more mess, more chaos, more opportunities for things to go wrong. But they also provided a rare chance to see these corporate warriors in their natural habitat as parents, spouses, human beings, instead of just titles and salaries. "We'll keep an eye out," Marcus assured him. "Appreciate it, buddy. See you Saturday." As Tom walked away, Marcus felt a small warmth in his chest. Buddy. When was the last time someone had called him that? When was the last time anyone had acknowledged that he was more than just a uniform and a mop bucket? The afternoon brought its usual parade of meetings and minor crises. Marcus cleaned around heated discussions about market volatility, whispered conversations about office politics, and urgent phone calls about client emergencies. He was a silent witness to the complex ecosystem of corporate America, observing but never participating, present but never acknowledged. As 5 o'clock approached and the building began to empty, Marcus found himself alone with his thoughts. He pushed his cart toward the supply closet, passing the company's wall of achievement, framed photographs of Sterling Financial Group's greatest successes, awards, and accolades. Jonathan Sterling featured prominently in many of the photos, shaking hands with politicians, accepting awards, cutting ribbons at charity events. Marcus paused in front of one particular photograph. It showed Sterling at a children's hospital, presenting a large check to the pediatric ward. Next to him stood his wife, elegant and poised, and little Emma, grinning widely despite the formal setting. The caption read, "Sterling Financial Group donates $500,000 to children's medical research." For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to have that kind of impact, to write checks that could change lives, to matter in such a tangible way. But then he shook his head and continued toward the supply closet. Some dreams were too big for men like him. As he stored his equipment and prepared to leave for the day, Marcus reflected on the strange contradiction of his existence. He spent more time in this building than most of the executives, knew its rhythms and secrets better than anyone, and yet remained completely invisible to the people whose lives he quietly supported. But invisibility had its advantages too. It allowed him to observe, to understand, to see the humanity behind the corporate masks. And sometimes, Marcus thought as he gathered his jacket and lunch bag, being invisible meant you were perfectly positioned to see what others missed. Saturday's company picnic would be different from the usual office routine. There would be families, laughter, children playing, a rare glimpse behind the professional facades. Marcus found himself looking forward to it, though he couldn't quite explain why. As he walked toward the elevator, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in the polished brass doors. Same uniform, same graying temples, same tired shoulders. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was something different in his eyes, a quiet anticipation, a sense that the change was coming, even if he couldn't yet see its shape. If this part also touched your heart, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to this story. Sometimes the most important people are the ones we never really see. The elevator doors closed, and Marcus descended toward the lobby, carrying with him 8 years of invisible observations and a strange feeling that his carefully ordered world was about to shift in ways he never could have imagined. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. Marcus stood in front of his small bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of his polo shirt, the same navy blue as his work uniform, but softer, more comfortable. He had been given specific instructions to dress casually for the company picnic, though he suspected his definition of casual differed significantly from that of Sterling Financial Group's executives. His one-bedroom apartment in Queens was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and occasional bark of Mrs. Chone's dog next door. Marcus had lived here for 12 years, ever since his divorce was finalized, and he needed somewhere affordable to start over. The walls were bare except for a single photograph of his daughter, Lisa, taken at her high school graduation 3 years ago. She lived in Portland now, working at a non-profit and calling every few weeks with updates about her life, that felt increasingly distant from his own. Marcus made his usual breakfast, black coffee and toast with strawberry jam, while reviewing the mental checklist Tom Bradley had given him for the picnic. Setup began at 7 a.m., families would start arriving at 11, and the event would run until 4 p.m. His job was simple: maintain cleanliness throughout the day, empty trash receptacles, and assist with breakdown afterward. Standard invisible man duties. The Sterling Financial Group had rented Riverside Park's largest pavilion area for the event. Marcus arrived early, as always, to find the catering trucks already unloading tables, chairs, and enough food to feed a small army. The October morning was cool, but promised warmth later, and the changing leaves provided a picture-perfect backdrop for what corporate communications would undoubtedly describe as team building and family fun. "Marcus, good to see you, buddy." Tom Bradley appeared at his elbow, clipboard in hand and radio clipped to his belt. "How's the setup looking?" Marcus surveyed the organized chaos around them, moving along nicely. "The bounce house crew should be here within the hour, and the caterers are ahead of schedule." "Perfect. Listen, I wanted to give you a heads up." Tom lowered his voice slightly. "Mr. Sterling's bringing his family today, obviously. His wife, Emma, is lovely, but she's protective, and little Emma, well, she's 7 years old and has more energy than a nuclear reactor. They'll probably stick close to the family area we've set up near the pavilion, but kids have a way of wandering." Marcus nodded. He had observed enough family dynamics in the office building to understand the delicate balance of executive parent wanting to appear accessible and down-to-earth while maintaining appropriate boundaries and security. As the morning progressed, the park transformed from an empty green space into a corporate carnival. Colorful banners bearing the Sterling Financial Group logo fluttered from tent poles. A DJ tested his sound system with classic rock hits from the 80s. The bounce house, a massive inflatable castle in primary colors, rose like a beacon for every child who would attend. Marcus moved through the setup process with practiced efficiency, positioning trash receptacles strategically, ensuring the hand-washing stations were properly stocked, and double-checking that the children's activity area met safety standards. His years of invisible observation had taught him to anticipate problems before they occurred. At 10:30, the first families began arriving. Marcus recognized many faces from the office building: Sarah from accounting with her teenage son, David from marketing accompanied by an elegant woman who must be his wife, Jennifer from HR with a toddler on her hip and a harried expression that suggested morning chaos at home. But it was fascinating to see these corporate personalities in their natural habitat as parents and spouses. Patricia Hawthorne, who had complained about the fingerprint on the conference room door, was now crouched in the grass helping her twin daughters adjust their matching pink tutus. The transformation was remarkable. Her sharp executive demeanor softened into something genuinely maternal. Marcus was emptying a trash receptacle near the children's area when a familiar voice made him look up. "Daddy, can we go on the bounce house now, please?" Emma Sterling was tugging on her father's hand, her dark hair pulled back in pigtails secured with bright yellow ribbons that matched her sundress. She was small for 7, but her personality filled the space around her with infectious energy. Jonathan Sterling knelt to his daughter's eye level, and Marcus was struck by the gentleness in his voice. "Not yet, sweetheart. Let's wait until more kids arrive so you'll have friends to play with, okay?" "But I want to bounce now," Emma insisted, her lower lip jutting out in a classic 7-year-old pout. "Emma Catherine Sterling," came another voice, warm but firm. "Emma Sterling, Mrs. Sterling approached them, carrying a designer diaper bag and wearing jeans that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, but somehow managed to look perfectly casual. "What did Daddy just say?" "Wait for friends," little Emma mumbled, but her eyes kept drifting toward the colorful bounce house. Marcus found himself smiling as he continued his work. Despite their wealth and status, the Sterlings were dealing with the same parenting challenges as every other family here. Children didn't respect corporate hierarchies or bank account balances when they wanted something. As more families arrived, the park filled with the sounds of childhood laughter, shouting, the occasional tears over scraped knees or disputed toys. Marcus moved through it all like a ghost, emptying trash, wiping down tables, ensuring the food service areas remained clean and safe. He was restocking napkin dispensers when he overheard a conversation that made him pause. "The quarterly numbers look strong," one of the senior partners was saying to Jonathan Sterling, "but the Jakarta deal is still giving us headaches." "I know," Sterling replied, his voice carrying the weight of executive responsibility, even at a family picnic. "Richardson thinks we can restructure the payment schedule, but the client is pushing back on timeline. Maybe we should discuss this Monday." "No." Sterling's tone was firm, but not unkind. "Today is family day. Business can wait until Monday morning." Marcus was impressed, despite himself. Whatever his other flaws, Sterling seemed committed to maintaining boundaries between work and family time. It was a lesson many executives never learned. The afternoon progressed with typical picnic energy. Children ran between activities, parents clustered in conversation groups, and teenagers sulked in strategic locations that allowed them to appear too cool to participate, while still maintaining optimal observation positions. Marcus was replacing trash bags near the food service area when disaster struck with the swift efficiency that characterizes most accidents involving children. Emma Sterling had finally been given permission to use the bounce house, and she was making the most of it. Her yellow dress flashed like sunshine as she bounced with 3 other children, her laughter carrying across the park. Her parents sat at a nearby table with other executives, close enough to supervise but far enough to allow independence. That's when Marcus noticed the older boys. 3 kids, probably 11 or 12 years old, were approaching the bounce house with the kind of swagger that meant trouble. Marcus recognized the type, not malicious necessarily, but old enough to think themselves superior to the younger children and young enough to make poor decisions about how to demonstrate that superiority. "This is for little kids," one of them announced loudly, climbing onto the bounce house, despite the posted age restrictions. Time for some real bouncing. Marcus was already moving before he fully processed what was happening. The older boys were bigger, heavier, and their presence immediately changed the dynamics inside the inflatable structure. The younger children, including Emma, were being tossed around by the older kids' aggressive bouncing. "Hey!" Marcus called out, but his voice was lost in the ambient noise of the picnic. That's when he saw it happen. One of the older boys, probably showing off, executed a particularly dramatic jump that sent Emma Sterling flying toward the bounce house entrance. She hit the padded edge at an awkward angle and tumbled out, landing hard on the grass outside. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. Emma lay motionless on the ground, her yellow dress crumpled around her small form. The older boys stopped bouncing, suddenly aware that their fun had consequences. Other children paused in their play, sensing that something was wrong. Then Emma started seizing. Marcus was running before anyone else even realized what was happening. His years of invisible observation had taught him to notice details others missed, and he had seen the way Emma's head had struck the ground, had watched the specific angle of her fall, call 911, he shouted, to no one in particular as he dropped to his knees beside the little girl. Behind him, he could hear the commotion. As adults began to realize what had happened, could hear Jonathan Sterling's voice calling his daughter's name with rising panic. But Marcus blocked out the noise and focused entirely on Emma. She was unconscious now, her small body still, but her breathing was shallow and irregular. Marcus had seen enough medical emergencies during his 20 years working in various buildings to know the basics of first aid, and more importantly, he knew when to act and when to wait for professionals. "Emma," he said softly, checking her pulse and looking for signs of obvious trauma. "Emma, sweetie, can you hear me? If you want to keep hearing stories like this, tap the red button that says subscribe. It's free, and it helps me keep sharing stories about the moments that change everything." Jonathan Sterling reached them just as Emma's eyes fluttered open. She looked confused, frightened, and when she tried to sit up, Marcus gently but firmly kept her lying down. "Don't move, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You took a little tumble, and we want to make sure you're okay before you get up." "Daddy," Emma's voice was small and scared. "I'm right here, baby." Sterling's voice was thick with emotion as he knelt beside Marcus. "You're going to be fine." Marcus looked up at Sterling for the first time in 8 years, their eyes meeting over the small girl lying between them. "She hit her head pretty hard," Marcus said quietly. "The ambulance is coming, but she's conscious and responsive. That's a good sign." Sterling nodded, trust and gratitude evident in his expression. Around them, the picnic had transformed into organized chaos as adults shepherded other children away from the scene and cleared space for the incoming emergency responders. Mrs. Sterling arrived, her face pale but composed. "How is she?" "Conscious and talking," Marcus reported, never taking his eyes off Emma. "Pulse is steady. She's going to be okay. But the doctors will want to check for concussion." The sound of sirens grew louder, and Marcus knew his role in this drama was about to end. Soon the paramedics would take over, the Sterling family would follow their daughter to the hospital, and the invisible janitor would fade back into the background. But, for this moment, kneeling in the grass beside a frightened little girl, while her parents looked on with gratitude instead of indifference, Marcus felt more visible than he had in years. The ambulance pulled into the park just as Emma Sterling looked up at him with wide brown eyes and whispered, "Thank you, mister." And for the first time in 8 years, 3 months, and 17 days, Marcus Williams felt like he truly mattered. The ambulance's red and blue lights painted the autumn afternoon in urgent colors as paramedics rushed toward the small crowd gathered around Emma Sterling. Marcus remained kneeling beside the little girl, his hand resting gently on her shoulder to keep her still, while her parents flanked them both with expressions of barely controlled panic. "I'm Sarah. I'll be taking care of you today," the lead paramedic announced, her voice professionally calm as she knelt beside Marcus. She was a woman in her 30s, with kind eyes and efficient movements. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma," came the small voice from the grass. "Emma Sterling. That's a beautiful name. Emma, I'm going to ask you some questions while my partner gets our equipment, okay?" Marcus started to move away to give the professionals room, but Emma's small hand caught his wrist. "Don't go," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm not going anywhere," Marcus assured her, looking to the paramedics for permission. Sarah nodded and continued her assessment. "Can you tell me how old you are, Emma?" 7. "And what day is it today?" Emma thought for a moment. "Saturday. Daddy's work picnic day." Jonathan Sterling exhaled with visible relief at his daughter's coherent responses. He caught Marcus's eye again, and this time Marcus saw something he had never expected to see, directed at him, genuine respect and gratitude. "Sir," Sarah addressed Marcus, "you witnessed the fall." "Yes. She was in the bounce house with some older kids. One of them jumped hard, sent her flying out. She landed here and hit her head on the ground, then had what looked like a brief seizure before losing consciousness for maybe 30 seconds. The paramedic nodded, making notes while her partner prepared a neck brace and backboard. "You did exactly the right thing keeping her still. Head injuries can be tricky." As the paramedics worked, Marcus became aware of the crowd that had gathered. What felt like the entire Sterling Financial Group employee roster stood in a semicircle around them, watching their CEO kneel in the grass beside his injured daughter and the janitor who had rushed to help her. For the first time in 8 years, Marcus was the center of attention. Every eye was on him, but not with the usual unseeing indifference. Patricia Hawthorne stood with her hands pressed to her mouth, her twins clinging to her legs. Tom Bradley was coordinating with park security to keep the area clear. Even the older boys who had caused the accident watched from a distance, their earlier swagger replaced by guilt and concern. "We're going to transport her to Children's Hospital for observation," Sarah announced to the Sterling parents. "Precautionary measure, but with head injuries, we don't take chances." "Of course, Emma Sterling," Mrs. Sterling said immediately. "Whatever she needs." As the paramedics carefully secured little Emma to the backboard, she kept looking for Marcus. "Will he visit me in the hospital?" she asked, her voice muffled by the oxygen mask they had placed over her face. "If your parents say it's okay," Marcus replied, glancing at Jonathan Sterling. "Please," Sterling said without hesitation, "you'll always be welcome." The words hit Marcus with unexpected force. Always be welcome. When was the last time anyone had said those words to him? As the ambulance pulled away with the Sterling family inside, the crowd began to disperse, but not before something remarkable happened. One by one, Marcus's invisible colleagues began approaching him. "Marcus, right?" Patricia Hawthorne extended her manicured hand. "I don't think we've ever been properly introduced. I'm Patricia, CMO." Marcus shook her hand, surprised by the genuine warmth in her grip. "We've met, Miss Hawthorne. I clean your office." She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yes, well, what you did today was incredible. Thank you." Others followed. Sarah from accounting, whose son's college tuition worries Marcus had overheard for months, thanked him and asked about his own children. David from marketing, still accompanied by his elegant wife, shook his hand and said he hoped they could talk more at the office. Jennifer from HR, juggling her toddler, told him he was a hero. Hero. The word felt strange and unfamiliar, like clothes that didn't quite fit. Tom Bradley appeared at his side as the crowd thinned. "Hell of a thing, Marcus. You'd probably save that little girl from serious injury." "Just did what anyone would do," Marcus replied, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't entirely true. Others had been closer to the bounce house. Others had seen the older kids being rough. But only Marcus had been watching with the kind of attention that comes from years of invisible observation. "Not everyone would have reacted that fast," Tom said. "Not everyone would have known to keep her still or how to assess her condition." "Where'd you learn first aid?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, remembering. "My ex-wife was a nurse. She taught me basic emergency response when Lisa, my daughter, was little. Said you never know when you might need it." Smart woman. She was. Marcus looked around at the gradually returning picnic atmosphere. "I should probably get back to cleanup duty." But even as he returned to his routine tasks, Marcus noticed the change. People were looking at him differently. When he emptied trash receptacles, employees thanked him by name. When he wiped down tables, parents struck up conversations about their children. The invisible barrier that had separated him from the Sterling Financial Group, community-free years, had somehow dissolved in the space of a single emergency. Around 3 o'clock, as the picnic was winding down, Marcus received a text message on his phone. He almost ignored it. He rarely got texts during work hours, but something made him check. "This is Jonathan Sterling. Got your number from HR files. Emma is doing well, mild concussion, overnight observation, but she'll be fine. She keeps asking about the nice man who helped her. Would you be available to visit tomorrow? Children's Hospital, room 314. DJ's Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. In 8 years of working for Sterling Financial Group, he had never received direct communication from the CEO. Now Jonathan Sterling was personally inviting him to visit his daughter in the hospital. He typed back, "Of course. What time works best?" The response came quickly. "Visiting hours start at 10 a.m. Thank you, Marcus, for everything." That evening, Marcus sat in his small apartment, looking at a single photograph on his wall, Lisa, at her high school graduation. When was the last time he had visited someone in the hospital? When was the last time anyone had asked him to visit? He thought about calling Lisa to tell her about the day's events, but settled for sending her a text instead. Their relationship had grown cautious over the years, conversations limited to safe topics and surface updates. How do you tell your daughter that for the first time in years, you felt like you mattered? Sunday morning, Marcus arrived at Children's Hospital, carrying a small stuffed elephant he had purchased at the gift shop. He had debated the purchase for 20 minutes. Was it appropriate? Would the Sterling family find it presumptuous? Before deciding that 7-year-old girls generally appreciated stuffed animals regardless of social hierarchies. Room 314 was private and spacious, with windows overlooking the city. Emma Sterling was sitting up in bed, looking remarkably alert for someone who had been unconscious less than 24 hours earlier. Her parents flanked her bed, and Mrs. Sterling was reading from what appeared to be a chapter book. "Marcus." Emma's face lit up when she saw him enter. "Mummy, Daddy, it's the nice man." "Hello, Emma," Marcus said, approaching the bed with the kind of careful respect he might show in a cathedral. "How are you feeling?" "My head hurts a little, but the doctors say I'm going to be perfect. Look." She pointed to a small bandage on her forehead. "I have a battle scar." Jonathan Sterling stood and extended his hand. "Marcus, thank you for coming, and thank you again for yesterday. The doctors said your quick response and keeping her immobilized probably prevented more serious injury. I brought you something," Marcus said to Emma, offering the stuffed elephant. "I thought you might like some company while you recover." Emma hugged the elephant to her chest, her face glowing with delight. "He's perfect. What's his name?" "That's up to you to decide." "Bouncy," Emma announced immediately, "because we met at the bounce house." Mrs. Sterling, who had insisted Marcus call her Emma as well, to avoid confusion, gestured to the chair beside the bed. "Please, sit. We were just talking about yesterday. What comes next is even stronger, ... And to not miss the ending, tap the subscribe button now. It's free, and you'll be with me in every new story." As Marcus settled into the chair, he realized this was the longest conversation he had ever had with any member of the Sterling family. In fact, it might be the longest conversation he had had with anyone from work since he started at Sterling Financial Group. "Emma has been asking about you," Mrs. Sterling continued. "She wants to know where you live, if you have children, what your favorite color is. Can you answer my questions?" Little Emma asked, clutching Bouncy the elephant. For the next hour, Marcus found himself in the strangest interview of his life. Emma Sterling, age 7, proved to be a relentless and thorough questioner. She wanted to know about his apartment. "Do you have a garden?" "No, but I have plants on my windowsill." "His family is your daughter older than me?" "Much older. She's 21. "His hobbies, do you like to read?" Very much. And his work, do you like cleaning? It seems boring. It can be peaceful. Her parents listened with the kind of attention Marcus had never experienced from adults. They asked follow-up questions, laughed at his stories about the various office buildings he had worked in over the years, and seemed genuinely interested in his perspective on their company. You know, Jonathan Sterling said during a lull in Emma's interrogation, "You see more of what goes on in our offices than most of the executive team. I'd be interested in your observations sometime." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that. His observations, the ones that included overheard affairs, suspected embezzlement, and enough interpersonal drama to fuel a television series. "I'm mostly just trying to do my job without getting in anyone's way," he said diplomatically. "But you notice things," Mrs. Sterling observed. "Yesterday, you were the only one who saw the problem developing with those older boys. You were watching when no one else was paying attention." She was right, of course. Invisible people developed exceptional observational skills by necessity. When no one sees you, you learn to see everything. "I suppose you're right," Marcus admitted. "It comes with the territory." "What territory?" little Emma asked. Marcus thought for a moment. "When you're very quiet, you notice things that other people miss. Like how your daddy's voice changes when he's worried, or how your mummy smooths your hair when she wants you to feel better." Emma considered this seriously. "Are you very quiet because you're sad?" The question caught Marcus off guard with its directness. Children had a way of cutting through adult pretenses and asking the questions that mattered. "Sometimes," he said honestly. "But yesterday, when I was helping you, I wasn't sad at all." "Good," Emma declared. "Because you're my friend now. And friends shouldn't be sad." As visiting hours ended and Marcus prepared to leave, Jonathan Sterling walked him to the elevator. "Marcus, I want you to know that what happened yesterday changes things. I've been thinking about it all night, and I realize I have been missing something important." Marcus waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. "You've been part of our company for 8 years, and I've never had a real conversation with you until now. That's not just my failure, it's a company-wide blind spot. We've been so focused on the people in suits that we forgot about the people who make everything work." The elevator arrived, but Marcus didn't step inside immediately. "I'd like to talk more about this," Sterling continued. "Would you be available for coffee sometime this week? I have some ideas I'd like to discuss with you." Marcus nodded, still processing the surreal nature of the entire weekend. "Of course, Mr. Sterling," Jonathan Sterling corrected, "and Marcus, thank you for showing us what we've been missing." As the elevator doors closed and Marcus descended toward the lobby, he caught sight of his reflection in the polished steel. Same graying temples, same tired shoulders, same worn jacket, but something in his eyes was different, a spark of possibility that hadn't been there 48 hours ago. For 36 years, Marcus Williams had been learning the art of invisibility. Now, it seemed, he was about to discover what it felt like to be seen. Monday morning at Sterling Financial Group felt different the moment Marcus stepped off the elevator on the 42nd floor. For 8 years, he had moved through these hallways like a ghost, but today people were looking at him, really looking at him, and several actually spoke. "Morning, Marcus," called Rebecca Martinez, Jonathan Sterling's personal assistant, as she hurried past with a stack of files. "How's little Emma doing?" "Much better, thank you," Marcus replied, still adjusting to being addressed by name rather than being invisible. Even his cleaning cart seemed to draw attention. Patricia Hawthorne emerged from her office as he passed and actually smiled at him, a genuine expression, not the professional mask she wore during board meetings. "Marcus, I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. I realize I haven't been very kind over the years. That comment about the conference room window was inexcusable. Marcus paused, unsure how to respond. He'd grown so accustomed to being overlooked that apologies felt like foreign currency he didn't know how to spend. It's quite all right, Miss Hawthorne. Patricia, please. And it's not all right. I was thinking about it all weekend. How many times I've walked past you without even acknowledging your presence. That changes now. As she returned to her office, Marcus continued his rounds with a strange lightness in his chest. The morning progressed with similar interactions. Colleagues who had never spoken to him before now offered greetings, thanks, and genuine interest in his well-being. Around 10 o'clock, Marcus received a text from Jonathan Sterling. Could you meet me in conference room A at 11? Want to discuss some ideas with you. JS conference room. Marcus had cleaned that room hundreds of times, had emptied its wastebaskets after countless high-stakes meetings, had polished its massive mahogany table while executives made decisions worth millions of dollars. But he had never sat at that table. At 11 sharp, Marcus knocked on the conference room door, his heart beating faster than seemed reasonable for a simple meeting. Come in, came Sterling's voice. Jonathan Sterling sat at the head of the table, but instead of his usual power position, he had chosen a chair along the side, gesturing for Marcus to sit across from him. 2 cups of coffee sat on the table, steam rising from both. Thank you for coming, Sterling said, and Marcus was struck again by the genuine warmth in his voice. I hope you don't mind coffee. Rebecca mentioned you take it black. Marcus settled into the leather chair, softer and more comfortable than anything in his apartment, and wrapped his hands around the warm mug. This is fine, thank you. How's Emma doing? The real version, not the brave face she puts on for her parents. Marcus smiled. She's resilient. Asked me about 15 questions during my visit yesterday, including whether I think elephants dream and if I know any good jokes about hospitals. And do you know any good hospital jokes? Why did the doctor carry a red pen? Marcus asked. Sterling shook his head. In case he needed to draw blood. Sterling laughed, genuine surprise sound. I'll have to remember that one. Emma loves terrible jokes. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping coffee while Marcus tried to process the surreality of sharing casual conversation with the CEO, whose name was on the building. Marcus, I want to talk to you about something that's been on my mind since Saturday, Sterling began, his tone becoming more serious. What happened with Emma was a wake-up call for me, but not just about emergency preparedness or child safety. Marcus waited, unsure where this conversation was heading. You've been working here for 8 years, and until Saturday, I couldn't have told you your last name. I knew you cleaned our offices, I'd seen you in the hallways, but I never really saw you as a person. That's not just my failure, it's a systemic issue in how we operate as a company. Sterling leaned forward, his expression intense. Saturday, you demonstrated something that our entire executive team missed. You were paying attention when no one else was. You saw a problem developing, you recognized the severity of the situation, and you acted decisively. Those are leadership qualities. I just did what needed to be done, Marcus replied quietly. Exactly. But here's what I've been thinking about. How many of the problems do you see that we miss? How many insights do you have about our operations, our people, our company culture, that we never access because we've created this invisible barrier between management and support staff? Marcus considered the question carefully. The honest answer was many. He had observed workplace harassment that went unreported, had noticed patterns of employee stress that preceded resignations, had overheard client concerns that never reached executive ears. but sharing those observations felt like betraying confidences, even if those confidences had never been intentionally shared. "I see things," he admitted, "but I have always assumed that wasn't my place to comment. What if it was? What if we created a space where your observations were not just welcome, but valued?" Sterling pulled out a folder and opened it on the table. "I've been researching companies that have successfully integrated employee feedback from all levels. Some fascinating case studies, businesses that improved efficiency, employee satisfaction, and even profitability by listening to people who had been invisible in their decision-making processes." Marcus found himself leaning forward, genuinely interested despite his apprehension. "I'm thinking about creating a new position," Sterling continued. "Employee experience coordinator. Someone who would work across all departments, observing workplace dynamics, identifying issues before they become problems, and serving as a bridge between different levels of our organization." The implications of what Sterling was suggesting began to dawn on Marcus. "You're talking about me. I'm talking about someone with your skills and perspective. Someone who already knows our company culture intimately, who has demonstrated judgment and discretion, and who clearly cares about the well-being of others." Marcus felt a mix of excitement and terror. For 8 years, he had been content to at least resign to his invisible role. The idea of stepping into visibility, of taking responsibility for observations he had always kept private, was overwhelming. "I don't have a college degree," he said. "I don't have management experience or corporate training. You have 8 years of observational experience in our company. You have demonstrated crisis management skills. And you have something that can't be taught, the ability to see people as individuals rather than just job titles." Sterling closed the folder and looked directly at Marcus. "I'm not asking for an answer today. This would be a significant change for both of us, but I want you to think about it. Would you be interested in exploring this possibility?" Marcus nodded slowly, his mind racing with questions and possibilities he had never allowed himself to consider. "There's something else," Sterling said. "Emma, my daughter, has been asking when she can see you again. She's convinced you're the most interesting person she's ever met, and she wants to show you her stuffed elephant collection when she gets home from the hospital." The invitation carried weight beyond its simple words. Sterling wasn't just suggesting a professional opportunity. He was opening his family circle to include someone who had been invisible for years. "I'd like that," Marcus said. "Very much." As the meeting concluded and Marcus returned to his cleaning duties, his mind buzzed with the conversation's implications. The routine tasks that had defined his days for 8 years, emptying wastebaskets, mopping floors, polishing surfaces, suddenly felt like they might be temporary rather than permanent fixtures of his life. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus found himself observing his surroundings with new eyes. Instead of simply noting messes to clean or maintenance issues to report, he began cataloging the human dynamics he witnessed. Sarah from accounting looked stressed, not unusual, but today her hands were shaking slightly as she reviewed documents. That suggested anxiety beyond normal work pressure. David from marketing was having an intense, whispered conversation with someone on his phone, repeatedly glancing around to ensure privacy. Jennifer from HR had been in her office with the door closed all morning, which typically indicated she was dealing with a personnel issue. For years, Marcus had filed away these observations as interesting but irrelevant. Now he wondered what patterns might emerge if someone was actually paying attention to them systematically. If this part also touched your heart, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to the story. Sometimes the biggest changes start with someone finally seeing what was always there. Around 3 o'clock, Marcus was cleaning near the reception area when he overheard a conversation that stopped him in his tracks. "Did you hear about Marcus and the Sterling girl?" One voice said. "The janitor. What about him? Saved the CEO's daughter at the company picnic. Kid fell and hit her head, and he was the only one who knew what to do. Word is Sterling's been personally thanking him." Seriously, that's crazy. I mean, good for him, but it's weird thinking of the cleaning guy as like a hero or something. The conversation continued, but Marcus had heard enough. He was becoming a story, a legend building among the staff. The invisible man who had stepped into the light at the moment it mattered most. That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at the single photograph on his wall. For the first time in years, he picked up his phone and called his daughter Lisa in Portland. "Dad?" She sounded surprised. Their calls were usually scheduled for Sunday evenings. "Hi, sweetheart. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "No, it's fine. Is everything okay? You sound different." Marcus smiled. Even 3,000 miles away, his daughter could detect changes in his voice that his co-workers had missed for years. "Something happened this weekend," he began, and found himself telling Lisa about Emma Sterling, the accident, the hospital visit, and the morning's conversation with her father. As he spoke, he heard something in his own voice that had been missing for years: excitement about the future. "Dad, that's incredible," Lisa said when he finished. "I mean, saving that little girl is amazing, but this job opportunity, it sounds like exactly the kind of thing you're good at. You've always been the most observant person I know. You think I should consider it?" "I think you should do more than consider it. Dad, you've been invisible for so long that I was starting to worry you were disappearing entirely. This could be your chance to matter again. Matter again." The phrase echoed in Marcus's mind long after they hung up. When had he stopped mattering? When had he accepted invisibility as his permanent condition? As he prepared for bed, Marcus looked again at the photograph of Lisa's graduation. In it, she was beaming with pride and possibility, ready to take on the world. He remembered feeling that way once, eager for challenges, confident in his ability to make a difference. Tomorrow he would return to Sterling Financial Group, but perhaps not as the same man who had left that evening. For 8 years, Marcus Williams had perfected the art of being invisible. Now he was about to discover what it felt like to step into the light and accept that sometimes the people who see everything are exactly the people who need to be seen. The possibility terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. But as he drifted off to sleep, Marcus found himself dreaming not of mop buckets and empty hallways, but of conference rooms where his voice mattered and observations that could change lives. Change was coming, and for the first time in years, Marcus Williams was ready to meet it head-on. The next 3 weeks passed like a whirlwind of change that Marcus could never have imagined. What started as informal conversations with Jonathan Sterling evolved into structured meetings, assessments, and the gradual construction of something entirely new within Sterling Financial Group. Marcus found himself spending mornings doing his regular cleaning duties and afternoons in conference rooms, sharing insights he had accumulated over 8 years of invisible observation. The transition felt surreal. Moment he was emptying wastebaskets. The next he was explaining to the executive team why employee turnover spiked every February, holiday debt stress, and why productivity dipped each Thursday afternoon. Weekly departmental meetings created backlog overflow. "This is fascinating," said Rebecca Martinez during one of their planning sessions. She had become Marcus's unofficial liaison, helping him navigate the corporate structures he had observed but never participated in. "You're essentially describing patterns that our HR data supports, but you're explaining the human reasons behind the numbers. Jonathan Sterling leaned back in his chair, studying a chart Marcus had created showing the correlation between office lighting changes and employee mood fluctuations. "How long have you been noticing these connections?" "Years," Marcus admitted. "When you're invisible, you have a lot of time to think about what you're seeing. I started recognizing patterns maybe 3 years ago, but I never thought anyone would be interested in my theories." "These aren't theories," Sterling said firmly. "These are insights based on direct observation. They're incredibly valuable." The employee experience coordinator position was taking shape around Marcus's unique perspective, rather than traditional corporate training. Sterling had decided to build the role around Marcus's existing skills while providing him with resources to formalize his observations. Dr. Sarah Chun, an organizational psychologist Sterling had hired as a consultant, was working with Marcus to develop systematic approaches to workplace observation and intervention. Their sessions took place in Conference Room B, and Marcus was gradually growing comfortable with being the person asking questions rather than the one quietly listening to answers. Traditional management theory focuses on top-down observation, Dr. Chun explained during one of their sessions. But you've been practicing bottom-up observations, seeing how decisions made in boardrooms actually affect people at every level of the organization. Marcus nodded, making notes in a leather portfolio Sterling had given him, his first official business accessory. "I've always wondered if the executives knew how their policies actually played out in daily life. Now you'll be able to tell them." "But Marcus, I want to prepare you for something. Not everyone is going to embrace this change. Some people are threatened by shifts in traditional hierarchies. You might face resistance." Dr. Chun's warning proved prescient. While most employees had welcomed Marcus's newfound visibility, a few senior managers were less enthusiastic about taking workplace insights from someone they still saw as just the janitor. The first real test came during a department head meeting where Marcus was invited to present his observations about interdepartmental communication issues. He had spent weeks preparing, documenting patterns he had noticed in how information flowed or failed to flow between different areas of the company. Marcus stood at the front of the conference room, facing 12 senior managers who represented every major department of Sterling Financial Group. Some faces showed genuine interest, others polite skepticism, and a few barely concealed irritation. "Thank you for having me," Marcus began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I want to share some observations about communication patterns I've noticed over the past 8 years. He clicked to his first slide, showing a simple diagram of the office layout with highlighted areas where he had consistently observed tension or confusion. "This intersection near the elevator bank," Marcus pointed to the diagram, "is where I've overheard more interpersonal conflicts than anywhere else in the building. After analyzing the timing, I realized it corresponds with shift changes between the day and evening security staff." Patricia Hawthorne, who had become one of Marcus's supporters, leaned forward with interest. "What kind of conflicts?" "Mostly miscommunications about access protocols and visitor management. The day staff makes decisions that the evening staff has to implement without full context, and vice versa. It creates friction that spreads to other departments because people get frustrated and carry that frustration into other interactions." Richard Blackwood, the chief financial officer, looked skeptical. "And you think this hallway tension significantly impacts our operations?" Marcus had expected this question. Blackwood was old-school corporate, someone who believed in traditional hierarchies and was clearly uncomfortable with a janitor addressing management issues. last month. The tension escalated to the point where evening security began strictly enforcing visitor policies that day. Security had been handling more flexibly. This caused problems for the legal department, who had clients arriving for after-hours document reviews. Those clients had to wait in the lobby for 30 minutes while security protocols were sorted out. One client was so frustrated that they nearly terminated their contract. The room went quiet. Marcus knew this information because he'd been cleaning the legal department when the crisis was unfolding. I'd heard the frantic phone calls and damage control efforts. "How do you know about the client situation?" Blackwood challenged. "Because I was there," Marcus said simply. "I've been in every department during every shift for 8 years. I've seen how small communication breakdowns create larger problems." Jonathan Sterling, who had remained quiet during the exchange, finally spoke. "What would you recommend to address this specific issue?" Marcus clicked to his next slide. A brief daily communication protocol between security shifts. 5 minutes of overlap time, where they share information about visitor expectations, special circumstances, and any policy clarifications from management. Simple, but it would prevent most of the conflicts I've observed. "That's actually a really good idea," admitted Tom Bradley, head of security. "We've been having those exact problems, but I never thought about the communication timing." The presentation continued for another 20 minutes, with Marcus outlining various communication gaps he'd observed and practical solutions based on his unique vantage point. By the end, even some of the skeptical managers were asking follow-up questions and requesting more detailed analysis. As the meeting concluded, Blackwood approached Marcus privately. "I'll be honest, I wasn't sure about this whole experiment. But you've clearly been paying attention to things the rest of us missed. I may not like the unconventional approach, but I can't argue with results." The acknowledgement meant more to Marcus than Blackwood probably realized. Earning respect from skeptics felt different from receiving sympathy or charity. Over the following weeks, Marcus's role continued to evolve. He developed a systematic approach to his observations, creating weekly reports that highlighted both problems and positive trends. His unique position allowed him to see connections that traditional management structures missed. When the quarterly employee satisfaction survey showed concerning trends in the accounting department, Marcus was able to provide context that the raw numbers couldn't capture. He had observed that Sarah Chun, not the psychologist, but Sarah from accounting, was exhibiting signs of severe stress that went beyond normal work pressure. "She's been working through lunch every day for 3 weeks, Marcus reported to Patricia Hawthorne, who oversaw HR functions. "And I've seen her in the office as late as 9 p.m. several nights. But it's not just the hours, she seems overwhelmed by something specific." Patricia nodded grimly. "The quarterly reconciliation has been particularly challenging this cycle. But we didn't realize it was affecting her that severely." "There's something else," Marcus said carefully. "I've noticed she's been making a lot of personal phone calls during work hours. Short conversations, but she looks upset afterward. That's new behavior for her." This observation led to a supportive conversation between Patricia and Sarah, which revealed that Sarah's elderly mother had been hospitalized and Sarah was trying to manage care coordination while meeting work deadlines. The company was able to provide additional support and temporary assistance, preventing what could have become a resignation or a health crisis. "You've probably saved her job and possibly her well-being," Patricia told Marcus afterward. "Traditional management would have seen declining performance and initiated disciplinary action. You saw a human being under stress and identified the root cause." But perhaps the most meaningful aspect of Marcus's transformation was his growing relationship with the Sterling family. True to her word, 7-year-old Emma had insisted on showing him her stuffed elephant collection when she was released from the hospital. What started as a courtesy visit had evolved into regular Sunday dinners at the Sterling household. "You know, Emma Sterling," Mrs. Sterling said during one of these dinners, "Emma talks about you constantly. You've become her favorite adult outside of family." Marcus looked across the dining room table at little Emma, who was earnestly explaining to her father why Bouncy the elephant needed his own place setting for dinner. The warmth he felt in this moment was unlike anything he had experienced in years. "She's changed my life too," Marcus said quietly. "All of you have." Jonathan Sterling raised his wine glass to new perspectives and second chances. As they toasted, Marcus reflected on how completely his world had transformed. 3 months ago, he had been invisible, resigned to a life of quiet observation and minimal impact. Now he was sitting at the CEO's dinner table, contributing to important business decisions, and serving as a trusted advisor to people who had once looked right through him. What comes next is even more incredible. And to not miss the ending, tap the subscribe button now. It's free, and you'll be with me in every new story that reminds us all how much we can change when someone finally sees our worth. The following Monday, Marcus received the official paperwork for his new position, Employee Experience Coordinator, with a salary that was nearly triple his janitor's wages and benefits that included health insurance, retirement contributions, and professional development opportunities. But as he signed the documents in Sterling's office, Marcus realized the most valuable change wasn't financial. For the first time in years, he felt like his life had purpose beyond simple survival. He was making a difference in ways both large and small, contributing to something bigger than himself. "Any regrets about leaving the cleaning cart behind?" Sterling asked with a smile. Marcus considered the question seriously. "Actually, I still plan to walk the halls regularly. You can't understand an organization from a conference room alone. The best insights come from staying close to the ground level. That's exactly why this is going to work," Sterling said. "You understand that observation is an active practice, not a passive one." As Marcus left the office that day, carrying his new business cards and a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in decades, he thought about the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. A little girl's accident had become the catalyst for changes none of them could have anticipated. But perhaps that was how the most important transformations happened, not through grand plans or strategic initiatives, but through simple moments of human connection that revealed what had been there all along. Marcus Williams was no longer invisible, and he was just beginning to understand what that might mean for his future, for Sterling Financial Group, and for everyone whose stories were waiting to be seen. 6 months after the company picnic that changed everything, Marcus Williams stood in conference room A, preparing for the most important presentation of his professional life. The quarterly board meeting was about to begin, and for the first time in Sterling Financial Group's history, the Employee Experience Coordinator would be addressing the board of directors. Marcus adjusted his tie navy blue silk, a gift from Jonathan Sterling, and reviewed his notes one final time. The leather portfolio that had once seemed so foreign now felt natural in his hands, filled with 6 months of systematic observations, data analysis, and concrete recommendations that had already begun transforming the company culture. "You ready for this?" Jonathan Sterling entered the conference room, looking relaxed despite the magnitude of the meeting ahead. "The past 6 months had changed him too," Marcus observed. The CEO seemed more connected to his company, more aware of the human dynamics that drove business success. "As ready as I can be," Marcus replied, then smiled. "Though I have to admit, addressing a board of directors wasn't exactly in my career planning 6 months ago. 6 months ago, none of us could have imagined where we'd be today," Sterling said. "Emma still talks about how you were the first person to really see her that day, not just as my daughter, but as a person who needed help." The conference room began filling with board members, a collection of distinguished men and women who represented decades of corporate leadership experience. Marcus recognized some faces from newspaper articles and company publications, but today they would be seeing him as an equal participant rather than invisible support staff. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling began once everyone was seated, "I'd like to introduce Marcus Williams, our Employee Experience Coordinator. 6 months ago, Marcus was working as our building maintenance supervisor. Today, he's going to share insights that have already begun revolutionizing how we understand and improve our workplace culture." Marcus stood, feeling the weight of 12 pairs of eyes focused on him with genuine attention. For so many years he had been unseen. Now he was the center of corporate decision-making discussions. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Board members, I want to start by sharing some numbers that might surprise you." Marcus clicked to his first slide, showing employee satisfaction metrics from the past 6 months compared to the previous 2 years. Employee satisfaction has increased by 37% since we began implementing observation-based workplace improvements. Voluntary turnover has decreased by 42%. Most significantly, cross-departmental collaboration efficiency has improved by 51%. Margaret Chung, the board's longest-serving member, leaned forward with interest. "Those are impressive numbers, Mr. Williams. Can you explain what observation-based workplace improvements actually means in practical terms?" This was the question Marcus had been preparing for. For 8 years, I observed workplace dynamics from a unique vantage point. I saw how policy decisions made in boardrooms actually affected people in their daily work lives. The improvements we've implemented are based on addressing gaps between intention and reality. He clicked to the next slide, showing a before and after diagram of information flow within the company. For example, we discovered that departmental meetings scheduled at the same time created information bottlenecks that led to duplicated work and missed opportunities. By staggering meeting times and creating brief interdepartmental communication windows, we eliminated approximately 15 hours of wasted effort per week across all departments. 15 hours per week, calculated Robert Hartman, the board's financial expert. That's significant productivity improvement with minimal cost investment. Exactly. Most of our improvements have required process changes rather than financial expenditure. We've learned that people want to do good work. They just need systems that support them rather than create obstacles. Marcus spent the next 20 minutes presenting case studies that demonstrated how invisible workplace friction had been costing the company money, talent, and opportunities. Each example was grounded in specific observations he had made during his years of unseen presence in the corporate environment. The breakthrough moment came when Margaret Chung asked Mr. Williams, "What's the most important thing this experience has taught you about leadership?" Marcus paused, thinking about the question that went to the heart of his transformation. "I've learned that true leadership isn't about being the person everyone looks up to," he said slowly. "It's about being the person who sees everyone clearly. For years I was invisible to most people in this company, but that invisibility taught me to really see others, their struggles, their strengths, their humanity behind their job titles. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each board member. The most powerful changes we've made haven't been about new policies or restructured hierarchies. They've been about creating space for people to be seen and heard. When employees feel valued as individuals, not just as functions, everything else improves naturally. The presentation concluded with Marcus's recommendations for expanding the employee experience. Coordinator model to other companies within Sterling Financial Group's portfolio. The board asked thoughtful questions, requested detailed implementation timelines, and unanimously approved funding for a comprehensive workplace culture initiative. As the meeting ended, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion, not because his work was finished, but because he had successfully bridged the gap between his old invisible existence and his new visible impact. Later that afternoon, Marcus was walking through the 42nd floor hallway, still part of his routine, though now he carried a tablet instead of a mop, when he encountered Patricia Hawthorne near the elevator bank. "Marcus, perfect timing," she said, her demeanor warm and collaborative in a way that would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. "I wanted to update you on the Sarah Chun situation." Sarah from accounting had become one of Marcus's most significant success stories. The support system they had implemented for employees dealing with family crises had not only helped Sarah through her mother's illness, but had become a model for comprehensive employee assistance. "She's doing wonderfully," Patricia continued. "Her productivity is back to normal levels, but more importantly, she told me yesterday that she's never felt more supported by a company. She actually said she plans to stay here until retirement because of how we handled her crises." "That's exactly what we hoped for," Marcus replied. "When people feel genuinely supported, loyalty follows naturally." As he continued his afternoon observations, Marcus reflected on the ripple effects of change that had spread throughout Sterling Financial Group, the company picnic accident that had revealed his quick thinking and compassionate nature had been just the beginning. The real transformation had come through months of patient work, building trust, and demonstrating that valuable insights could come from unexpected sources. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Important. Dad, I just got off the phone with Mum. She said you sound like a completely different person these days. Happy, engaged, excited about work. I'm so proud of you." Marcus smiled as he typed back, "Turns out I just needed someone to see me clearly." Everything else followed from there. Around 4 o'clock, Marcus was reviewing his daily observation notes when Rebecca Martinez approached with a special request. "Marcus, Mr. Sterling is wondering if you'd be available for a family dinner tonight. Emma has been working on a special project she wants to show you." The Sterling family dinners had become a monthly tradition, opportunities for Marcus to maintain the personal connection that had started his professional transformation. 7-year-old Emma had appointed herself his unofficial niece, and her parents had embraced the relationship with genuine warmth. That evening, Marcus arrived at the Sterling household carrying a small gifter book about elephants that he thought Emma might enjoy. The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the comfortable chaos of family life that Marcus had missed since his divorce. "Marcus." Emma Sterling ran to greet him, her energy as boundless as ever. "I made something for you. Come see." She led him to the living room, where an elaborate display covered the coffee table. It was a diorama of the Sterling Financial Group building, complete with tiny figures representing different employees. At the center of the scene was a small figure in a navy blue uniform pushing a miniature cleaning cart. "It's you," Emma announced proudly. "But look what happens next." She moved the small figure to different positions around the diorama, showing how the janitor character interacted with other figures, helped solve problems, and eventually stood at the front of a tiny conference room addressing a group of business people. "It's the story of how you became important," Emma explained with the matter-of-fact certainty of childhood. "Daddy told me you were always important, but people just forgot to notice." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Through a child's eyes, his transformation wasn't about career advancement or corporate success. It was simply about being seen for who he had always been. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made for me," he told Emma, kneeling to examine the intricate details of her creation. "The best part," Emma continued, "is that now everyone can see how special you are. Daddy says that's what good companies do. They help people shine." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself thinking about the unexpected journey that had brought him to this moment. The accident that could have been a tragedy had instead become a revelation. The little girl who had needed saving had ended up saving him in return. During dinner, Jonathan Sterling raised a topic that surprised Marcus. "I have been thinking about writing a book," Sterling said, "about unconventional leadership and the importance of seeing potential in unexpected places. Would you be interested in co-authoring it with me?" Marcus nearly choked on his wine. "Co-authoring? With you? Your perspective is unique, Marcus. You've experienced corporate culture from both ends of the spectrum. That dual viewpoint could help other companies recognize and develop talents they might be overlooking. If this part also touched your heart, tell me from which place in the world you're listening to this story." Sometimes, our greatest transformations come not from changing who we are, but from finding people who finally see who we've always been. As the evening wound down, Marcus stood on the Sterling family's front porch, looking up at the stars and thinking about the remarkable chain of events that had led him here. A year ago, he had been invisible, resigned to a life of quiet observation and minimal impact. Tonight, he was planning to co-author a book about leadership with the CEO of a major financial firm. But the most meaningful change wasn't professional success or financial security. It was the profound sense of purpose that came from knowing his observations mattered, his insights had value, and his presence made a difference in people's lives. Marcus Williams had spent decades learning the art of invisibility, but he had discovered something even more powerful: the transformative effect of being truly seen. As he drove home through the city lights, Marcus realized that his story wasn't really about transformation at all. It was about recognition, the moment when someone finally noticed what had been there all along. The skills, the wisdom, the capacity for impact had always existed within him. He had simply needed someone to look closely enough to see them. The janitor who had been ignored for years had become the employee experience coordinator who was reshaping corporate culture. The invisible man had found his voice, and the quiet observer had learnt that sometimes the most powerful position of all is being the person who truly sees others. Marcus Williams was no longer invisible, but more importantly, he was using his visibility to ensure that others would never have to feel unseen again. And that, he thought, as he pulled into his apartment parking lot, was a legacy worth building. The invisible man had become the one who helped others shine, and in doing so, he had discovered the most profound truth of all: when we truly see others, we finally become visible ourselves.